Hey guys, this is part two of our ranking for the Batman movies. And yeah, let's get into our next part. We left off on number eight of my ranking, so now we're on to number seven. Number seven in my ranking is Batman 1989. And this is actually where we're really going to get into our debate because this is Dad's number two. So, Dad, this is your second favorite Batman movie?
Yes.
Wow, what a statement. What makes this your second favorite?
Well, it was really the introduction of Batman as a live action character post Adam West.
Right.
This was it. This and there was such a see, like I was alive then. There was such a build up to it, and it was so controversial. And nobody thought that Johnny Dangerously was going to be able to play Batman. The story, what was it going to be? Was it going to be dark? It was Tim Burton.
Well, to be fair, Tim Burton is a pretty good director.
He is, but he's not exactly mainstream.
Okay.
So when you're going to, introduce a character like that, it was risky to make Burton the director, especially because he had done Edward Scissorhands
Well,
and movies like that.
I think Scissorhands was after this, honestly. His
Yeah, it was after, but still the Tim Burton
approach.
experience or approach to the character was definitely not what would I say was traditional to the character.
Okay, I see what you mean, but I will ask you this. Do you remember your experience when you first went and saw this movie in the theater?
I do.
What was it like? Were you nervous
It, it,
about it?
yeah, because it was awesome. I mean, it took a while because it was felt like it was kind of a slow build,
Yep.
getting into it. But I mean, you got to see, you know, Michael Keaton did a great job as Batman. I hated him as Bruce Wayne because he seemed too comedic, I guess, is kind of the thing.
Okay,
He
yeah, I
was,
get what you mean.
but as Batman, it was phenomenal. It was just, as an introductory movie to get yourself back into the character, it was phenomenal.
No, yeah, I agree with you on that. And yeah, I might have this again. It's number seven, but overall, I do think this movie is good. It has so many great things about it. I mean, Jack Nicholson as Joker, come on, that is awesome. He did such a great job in the role. And he is probably, I hate to say this, he is kind of the stand-up because he probably gives the best performance in the film. But other than that, no, I like Michael Keaton as Batman a lot. Not so much as Bruce Wayne, but we'll get into that in a minute. I
And then
also
here's the other thing.
Sure, what?
Prince did the soundtrack.
Yes.
Prince is one of the greatest artists ever, and the
Yes.
soundtrack for that movie is phenomenal.
Yeah, it
It
is.
really it the soundtrack actually it's funny. The soundtrack is so good the movie is almost like a musical, but in the best way possible.
Yeah. I get what you mean. And I do think that, but yeah, again, back to the performances, Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, they both did great in their roles. Now, another thing, now I know that you're not a huge fan of Tim Burton, but one thing that I think he always does very well with his movies would have to be the aesthetic. The aesthetic for all his films are always great. The way he makes them look, the way they're shot, the art style, the production. I think his movies always look great no matter what. And something that he achieved very well in this movie was Gotham City. Gotham City in both his Batman movies was very well.
He nailed it. He nailed it. And the characters were all good. And the fun part about it is all the characters, most of the characters in that movie were not super well known actors. A
Right.
lot of them were like B-list kind of actors. Because I believe, if I remember right, I believe the movie was actually filmed in England.
I think so, yeah, if I remember right. Yep.
And but what you'll notice is most of the characters, you didn't have a ton of like A-list characters. Yeah, you had Jack Nicholson, you had Michael Keaton, you had Kim Basinger. They were famous actors, but the rest of them were not. There was not a bunch of like a ton of A-list actors. You would notice like a lot of the henchmen and the guys like that. Those were guys that were henchmen in like every movie in those times. It was funny when you would watch TV or you would watch a movie, you always knew who the bad guy was because the guy played a bad guy in every movie.
Right.
And that was what was good about that movie is that it helped you focus on the main characters because you knew Nicholson was the Joker.
Yep.
Keaton was Batman. Vicky Vale, love interest, yes. But the rest of them, nobody was a list celebrity.
Right.
I think it like helps you focus.
Yeah, it does help you focus, and I get what you mean by that, and I do agree. Now, another thing that I think is great about this movie would have to be the Batmobile. I love the Batmobile in this movie. It's probably one of my favorite Batmobiles of all time. I just love the design and everything. It just looks like how the Batmobile should look.
It's
And
iconic. It's iconic because it was also copied in the cartoons.
yeah, it was. And, actually, fun fact, I think I heard that for when Kean had to get in the Batmobile, they had to give him a cowl with shorter ears because every time the door closed,
Pop the ears.
it would like catch onto his longer ears that he would usually have. I could be wrong, but I think I heard that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, every time he got in, they would have to give him a different cowl with shorter ears, so that way. And you probably don't notice it, but I think that's just a fun fact about it.
Another thing, they nailed the bat suit.
Yes, they did nail the bat suit. The bat suit in this is great.
It's nailed. It's perfect. It's not overdone. It was perfect.
It
It
was
was
great.
just absolutely perfect. They just nailed it.
And it looks like how the bat suit should look in the comics, especially, I think during the 80s.
Yes. Spandex and rubber. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So but yeah, I do have this movie at number 7 again, but I okay, so this is where I'm going to get into my cons with this film. And I don't know if you have any, but so here are mine. So again, I do think that this is a good movie overall, but and we've kind of discussed this from time to time, and I think you've kind of agreed with me a little bit, but despite the fact that I think it's a good movie, it's not a particularly strong Batman story in my opinion.
No, Batman is like a shadow in the night in the movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I get into it. So here's what I mean. So first off, before I get into that, I'm actually not a big fan of the whole idea of Joker being the one who, killed Bruce Wayne's parents. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, but I might have liked the idea when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I'm just not a big fan of the fact that Joker killed them. It's just not something that I'm into from time to time. Are you?
Yep. Well, you know what? But they tied it in well. At least the story, there was actually a believable story that tied it in. Whereas a lot of the other times, the killing of his parents is just like
Random?
a quick dream session
Right.
or a recall session where they basically just show a henchman with a gun shoot his parents, the pearl necklace breaks, blah blah blah, and then there's Bruce holding a rose crying. You
Yes.
know, the this there was at least a developed backstory.
Okay, yeah, I get what you mean with that. I mean, I still don't like it that much, but whatever. Another thing that I don't really like so much about the story is I don't like the sort of like triangle with Batman, Vicky Vale, and Joker. To me, I don't know. I might have liked it when I was younger again, but the whole idea of Batman and Vicky being involved, and then Joker just becomes obsessed with the girl who happens to be involved with Bruce Wayne, aka Batman. I just wasn't. I'm just not a fan of it overall. Are you?
Um, it was okay. As far as I was concerned, at least it gave a story to kind of tie everybody together. I mean, and at least most of it was somewhat believable. I mean, him being the little artist was kind of that I had more trouble with that
Okay,
than
yeah,
anything else.
yeah. The artist part I wasn't a fan of either. That it just didn't fit well in my opinion. But you know what? Whatever. It's Burton's version of Joker and whatnot. But another thing. So and this relates back to what we were saying earlier about how it's not a particularly strong Batman story, how Batman feels more like a shadow. Well, I will say this. So, in my opinion, Batman's not the main character of this film. The main character of the movie is the Joker. And also, not only do I feel like Batman's not really just not the main character, but I don't think he's really that much of the protagonist either. I honestly think Vicky Vale and her partner Alexander Knox feel as much like the heroes of the film as he does, in my opinion, because they have as much screen time, I think, as he does, and as much motivation to help and be the hero as he does. So I don't know. That's just kind of something that I think about when I look back at this movie.
Well, also the fact that they made Bruce Wayne a rodeo clown.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean by that. But do you kind of see what I'm saying, though?
No, I do. I mean, I get it, but Knox, they made his character was a lot more involved, but it's because there was a lot going on with Vicky, and Vicky was a guest in the city, and he was kind of her tour guide, if you will.
Yeah.
She was there on a, she had done that Cordo Maltese thing, and she was basically in the city following up because she wanted to do a story on Batman.
Yes.
Knox was quote unquote the Batman expert for the area. So that's kind of why his character was kind of important, because he was supposedly, trying to follow him around and get a little insight on him.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing because that's why I feel that they have as much presence as Batman does. And again, Batman feels more like a maybe not a side character, but he doesn't feel as major as he's supposed to be. And I guess that from what I've heard, I think Tim Burton said that he made that intentional because, the thing about Batman is remember, he's a guy who likes to stay in the shadows as much as possible and be,
Yes.
away from people as much as possible. So that's why he didn't have Batman in his movies as much, which I guess kind of makes sense. But I think you can still have Batman without while he's staying away from everyone. You can still focus on him even when he's hiding from everyone.
Yeah, but I think it was just because it was the introductory film introducing Batman basically back into a movie post the the joke of Adam West. And
Right.
I mean joke because that was a comedic version, whereas now we're going serious.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And now another issue that I have with this movie, and it's one that you have too. So while I do like Keaton's performance as Batman, to me, he's just not a very convincing Bruce Wayne.
He's horrible.
Oh wow, that's a statement.
That's that the scene where he goes, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts," and he's swinging that poker thing.
Yep, yep.
I was like, that is downright embarrassing.
Well, it's not so much that, and this relates back to what you were saying earlier about looks. So not only do I think he doesn't look like Bruce Wayne, he just doesn't have the sort of, I mean, it's not a bad performance per se, but he just
He
doesn't, it
he
doesn't, he
doesn't have the
doesn't,
charisma.
yeah, he doesn't bring the charisma that Bruce Wayne usually has. And, that's kind of an important part of the Bruce Wayne character, especially the persona, I think I should say in that.
Whereas a couple of the other guys ooze it. The charismatic part of that's probably the hardest. That's the hardest part of portraying Bruce Wayne,
Yes.
is to be able to have that charisma, that it's just there's only I feel like there's only two guys that have done it.
I get what you mean. All right. Well, I think that's where we'll end our discussion about Batman 1989. Now we'll move on to number 6 on my list, and that is Batman Returns. And this is actually your number 8. Now, I will say this, Dad. So, just question. So, you don't like this movie, right?
Batman Returns. Refresh me on which one this is.
This is the one with Danny DeVito as Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. It was Tim Burton's second Batman movie.
It's horrible.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're going there, huh?
I don't want my Penguin being a little fish man. Michelle Pfeiffer's character was funny. Keaton was better in this movie,
Yeah, I think Keaton was definitely better in this one. Well, because I think, it's the
but the
second.
rest of the movie was garbage.
Wow, you think it was garbage, really?
I didn't really care for it. I didn't like the Penguin character. I didn't like all the little marching penguins with the bombs and all that crap. It was like I think part of that was probably true to some of the comics,
Yes. Yep.
but I just did not care for it personally. It just was a slugfest of a movie. I didn't like Max Shrek.
Really?
I just I didn't, and I actually I think Christopher Walken is hilarious.
He is. He's a great actor.
He is a great actor, and I could not. I don't know. This movie just rubbed me the wrong way and everywhere. The only thing that was redeeming about this movie was Michael Keaton. He was phenomenal. He was a better Bruce Wayne in this movie than the first movie, and his Batman portrayal is excellent regardless.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Dad. I understand that you have issues. Could I tell you why I have this ranked as number 6 on my list? Why I prefer it over Batman 1989?
Absolutely.
I'm not expecting you to agree with me. I just want you to hear me out. All right. So for me personally, if I look at this movie, the reason I rank it higher than Batman 1989, overall, I kind of like the plot a little bit better. And here's why. So here's why I like it more than the original. So if you look at it as a sequel, it doesn't rely so heavily on the first movie to be a film because I think a lot of sequels, they rely so much on the first movie to exist. Whereas this one, it has its own like self-contained story to exist on its own. And that's something that I think the original franchise from the late 80s and 90s had that, a lot of the other franchises haven't, like the Dark Knight trilogy and whatnot. Those franchises felt more like one huge story, specifically the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Returns. They were all like one big story. And I think that's kind of how it feels with Ben Affleck's Batman. But with these movies, Batman 1989, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, they each had their own self contained plot and they didn't need to rely so heavily on each movie. They all, each felt like its own standalone. So that was something that I think this movie achieved very well. I don't know if you agree.
No, I totally agree with that. It totally did. It had its own storyline, it had its own set of characters. It could stand on its own without having to be attached to the other movies. Absolutely.
So that's something that I think it succeeds very well in being a sequel because that's something that a lot of sequels I think don't do very well.
No, agreed.
So yeah, that's something that I really like about this movie. Also, again, the reason I think the plot is better. So, the first one, it's really about Joker trying to poison Gotham with beauty and hygiene products, which, okay, fine. Joker would do something like that. But I like the idea of, Penguin trying to learn about his family, where he comes from, and he meets Max Schreck and he tries to gain power through him. I like the idea of Max Schreck also trying to use him to become mayor so that way he can gain more power as well. And I also loved that this movie had Catwoman. I thought she played a good role because, she wants to seek revenge. And it's one of those situations where you have a character who you don't not sure if you should root for or you should root against. And I also did like her, and I think that this relates back to what I was discussing earlier about these movies kind of having problems with love interests. This is one of the Batman movies that didn't struggle with a love interest. I did like her relationship with Batman slash Bruce Wayne in this movie, and I thought Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer were great together. I liked their chemistry. And so, yeah, I just liked that's one of the reasons I thought the plot flowed a little better than the first movie because there was more to it and it felt more complex in that way.
It totally did because the storylines, all the let's just say there's three storylines in the movie.
Yep.
They all rolled together and they all moved together all to the kind of same place. Even though they were dueling storylines, they all kind of fit together because you had the Penguin storyline with Shrek. You had the story of Catwoman. They built her backstory while she was dating Bruce and dating Bruce as Selina and as Catwoman and Batman. All those storylines kind of intersected and crossed, and it did give it some depth. I definitely agree with you on that.
Also, another thing that I think this movie does better than the first one, in my opinion, again, but I think that this movie does action a lot better because, action scenes have obviously been a big part of the Batman movies because, it's a superhero film. And honestly, I think the action in this one is a little bit better than the first movie, like especially that chase sequence with the Batmobile when Penguin's controlling it and driving it through the city, just destroying everything. Also, I think Batman has a little bit more combat in this movie than the first one, and we also saw his combat with Catwoman and Penguin even, and also just the action scenes at the end where they all show up at Penguin's little hideout and everything just goes crazy and they all have their showdown together. That's something that I thought this movie did a little better than the first one.
Yeah, but I think it was longer though. I think it was a lot longer than the first movie, if I remember right.
You mean the action scenes?
No, I'm talking about the length of the movie.
Okay, yeah, I know runtime's an issue with you. I'll that's
No,
for
but that's to fit it all in. So when you go crazy with the runtime, I just remember the movie being very long.
I don't think it's that long. I think it's just a little over 2 hours.
Yep.
But okay, I will agree with you on that. But like I see what you mean. Another thing that I think this movie does well well, I think it does as well as the first one is still the portrayal of Gotham City. You know, Tim Burton, he got a lot of things right with these movies and a couple of things not so great, but one thing that he definitely got right again was Gotham City. He made Gotham City look beautiful.
He nailed it.
He did, and that's one of the reasons that I like this movie. And so, but I despite that, I do have my issues with this movie. So overall, I guess the pacing in this movie is kind of sluggish, and it does take a while to get certain things moving. And again, I actually do like Danny DeVito's performance in this movie, but Penguin's characterization, I guess, might feel a little bit weird because it's kind of different from the well, it's probably very different, and it's a little bit more. See, here's the thing: Tim Burton obviously tried to make this one more like a, I think the first one feels a little bit more like a superhero film, whereas this movie feels more Tim Burton-esque than the first movie did.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but he tried to make it a little, I don't know, maybe
Too weird.
too weird. Yeah, maybe, but yeah, that's another issue that I had. But again, I still like the movie, but yeah, that might be something that other people didn't relate well with. And I think that's one of the main reasons why he was dropped from Batman Forever, which but that's a story for another video. And another issue that I had, it kind of relates to what I was saying earlier about Batman 1989, not enough Batman.
Yes.
Because, and again, I get that Tim Burton wanted to stay true to Batman being a guy who likes to stay in the shadows, but again, you can still focus on Batman while he's staying in the shadows instead of having him off screen so much.
He took his mask off too, and I could not stand that.
Oh, you mean at the end when he reveals it to Selena?
Yeah, that like made me pissed.
Is it
When I first saw that movie back in whatever it was, 91, 92,
92? Yep.
when that came out, when he ripped his mask off, I was in the movie theater like, hell no. Batman's not going to take his mask off and let people know who the hell he is. What is wrong with this? That I walked out of that movie, and that's all I was thinking about when that happened. I was like, what is going on here? People aren't supposed to know who Batman is.
Well, I think if he was doing it just for Catwoman, then I guess maybe, I guess that's passable. But Max Schreck was also there, and Penguin was in the background as well, somewhere, I think in the water or something. So yeah, I get what you mean right there. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. All right, well, you know what? I think that's where we'll end our discussion for Batman Returns. I'm sorry you don't like this movie, Dad. I hope my points kind of make some sense. If they don't, then whatever.
No, I agree. Like I said, the intersecting storylines is probably the the real piece of this movie that keeps you watching.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I will agree with that. Now, why don't we move on to the next one? So, number 5 on my list is Zack Snyder's Justice League, and this is actually your number 5 as well. So this is one that we both agree on, actually. So, Zack Snyder's Justice League. All right, so I'm gonna be honest with you. Ever since I was a little kid, I had always wanted to see a live action Justice League movie, and it really upsets me that the first one that we got was the theatrical one back in 2017 because that movie was kind of a disappointment, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was tough because there's you what you want, you just want so much more.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You get your appetite whet for this movie that's finally here, that they were talking about it for years and years. They never made it happen, and then it put it out and you were like, okay, that's what we get. Okay.
Well, yeah, and because one thing that happens, well, the reason I choose Zack Snyder's Justice League on this list instead of the theatrical cut is because this is the true version of that movie.
Yep, it is.
And I actually think,
Not the messed up Joss Whedon version.
yeah, that's what I mean, the 2017 cut that we got in theaters. So I do think that this movie is actually really great. Do you?
Yeah, I like it. The characters were good. The development was good.
And also, it has more of plot than the theatrical cut did. It has more story.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
the theatrical cut, the story for that movie is kind of simple. They're gonna do something. They say we're gonna band together to stop Steppenwolf, and then they just stop him, and then the movie's over. With this, there's a lot more to it, and that's one of the things I like about it. So yeah, I do like the plot for this movie better than what they did with the 2017 cut. And overall, I actually do think, again, I think it's a good movie. And I actually like the idea that Batman is the leader of the Justice League while Superman is dead for most of the movie, because I just love the idea of the one guy who doesn't have superpowers is the leader of the team, you know?
Yeah, but what most people don't get is Bruce Wayne's superpower is not his wallet, it's his brain.
Right, exactly. And also the
And
fact,
that's what people think, that like people think of Bruce Wayne, they think that his superpower is his money, it's his brain. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle quite a bit.
and well, not just his brain, but also I think his dedication. Because remember, Batman and Bruce Wayne, he's a guy who never gives up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the that's one of the reasons that I love his character so much. And I know that's one of the reasons you like his character too, right?
Yeah, it's the he's the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, he definitely is. And again, I think that Ben Affleck's Batman is kind of underrated because I think he did do really well in the role. I get that they had to spend a lot of time fleshing out each other character in the film, but I think we spent a good amount of time with his character, and he was a protagonist that I rooted for.
This was the one with the desert. This had the desert scenes and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, in the future with a Joker and everybody.
Yeah, I mean, they just it seemed like his character in that was the most developed.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Him and Cyborg probably.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, it was just like his character was great. And again, it's funny how much I just think that Affleck is like perfect as Batman. It's just like I can't even like you just you're like he's perfect.
Yep, he is. And I know you're not a huge fan of Affleck as an actor, but I do know that you do like him in this role.
Yeah, I mean, I really am not a fan of him as an actor. And you know, it's just like it's funny. I think I've used this term a couple times. Just like when I was talking about Burton, it's like nailed it. He just hit the character like perfect.
Yeah, he did.
It's probably the best character he's ever played.
As Batman.
Yeah,
Yeah, I will have to agree with that. I think it's one of his best performances. Now, another thing that's great about this movie, so I like how it takes its time to really flesh out each hero and show why they're in the movie, why they are heroes, why they exist and whatnot. Because I mean, I liked spending time with Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman after he was resurrected, but also I liked seeing Flash, I liked seeing Aquaman, I liked seeing Cyborg, I liked learning about them and seeing why they became heroes and whatnot. And I thought they all just worked really well. And I actually did like the heroes that they chose. I like how they didn't use so many other heroes. They used them instead.
character development was definitely good in this. They did a really good job um, creating backstory
Yes.
for all of those characters. They did a great job. But again, what has been a problem with me with a lot of these movies?
Runtime.
What's the runtime on this movie?
4 hours. Yes, 4 hours.
That's the problem with this movie. Is I wish this movie could have been two movies.
Or well, it could have been a 4 episode miniseries as well.
I would have taken this as two movies, but it was still good because it's not often that I'm engrossed into a movie for 4 hours, and I was with this. This movie does kind of, I'll say, I don't want to say suck you in, but I want to say it was immersive.
Yes.
When you got into it, it was really good. And when I walked out of there, because I think we saw this in the movie theater, didn't we?
No, it was on streaming. It was on HBO Max.
Okay, so we saw it on there. I didn't feel like I just wasted 4 hours of my life after walking out of this movie. It was good. It's very rare that you watch a movie that long that you walk out of it and you don't feel like, oh man, that was long.
Well,
Got out of it and it felt good.
well, for me personally, just as a person who just loves movies, so the way I look at it, I don't care how long a movie is. If a movie is 3 hours, if it's 2.5 hours, if it's three and a half, if it's four, I usually try to keep an open mind with that because I usually think, okay, well, you know what? If it needs to be, then I'll give it a shot and see how it is. And I always think that movies should be as long as they need to be. And I think this movie, if you did want to keep it as one film, it really did need to be as long as it was. And I know a lot of people have issues with films being long. A lot of people won't sit down to watch a movie that's 2.5 hours. They won't sit down to watch something that's 3 hours or 3.5, like a lot of other movies. Well, I mean, if you're going to watch a movie, if you love movies, then you should be willing to keep an open mind and watch it just to see. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, but I think it has a lot to do with your attention span too. Some people just can't sit down for that long.
Right.
That's the thing. I mean, when you're 4 hours, man, that is a lot to ask of somebody for a movie. That is a big ask. And this movie, it like I said, it felt you were into it, and it was good. And when it was over, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna get those 4 hours back.
Well, and yeah, I will say that. And again, the 4 hours thing, it is both a con and a pro for me. But another thing that, before I get into another con that I have, another pro about this movie would have to be the character of Steppenwolf, the villain, because I think that in the 2017 cut back, the theatrical cut, he didn't really feel like much of a character because he was just, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this because I'm evil and I want to do that. In this, they kind of give his character more because we find out how he wants to prove himself to Darkseid and kind of like redeem himself for failing him in the past. And I thought that was actually an interesting motivation for him as a villain because I think a lot of villains, not all of them, but well, not all of them, but some of them usually just are villains who just want to do something because they're evil. When they have an interesting or understandable motivation, that makes them more interesting as villains and characters.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Like I said, it was a good movie overall.
Yeah, it
I
was.
liked it. I liked it. It was good. I mean, what do we both have that at? Number five?
Number five, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, halfway there.
Well, but a big con that I have with this movie, it sets up so much that unfortunately we'll never see, probably.
That's true.
Because it sets at the end, it sets up what the future could be when they're out in the desert, when Superman, it looks like he's joined Darkseid, when Batman is with Joker and Mira and all those other characters. And it felt like there was so much that they set up. Like we saw the introduction of Martian Manhunter and the Atom. There was so much that they had set up with this movie that could have been at least two more Justice League movies by Zack Snyder. But unfortunately, it looks like we're never going to see that happen.
No, no, you won't because none of the people will agree on all of it.
Right. So yeah, that's probably a con. I mean, I do like the idea if they had actually did have those projects in development and eventually made, that wouldn't have been a con for me, but it is a con for me in this one because of how much was set up that I guess we might never see. But you know what? I still like the movie overall. I'm glad that it was finally released and Zack Snyder got to, tell his vision. But yeah, that's definitely, I do like this movie. It's number five, and yeah. All right, well, I think that's where we're going to end part two of our ranking. So yeah, if you guys want to hear the rest of the discussion, go check it out on the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, we'll see you there. Bye.